Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Odin's Movie Blog. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well. And today we've got some news from our boys over at Bounding Into Comics. Huge shout out to John F. Trent. It was so awesome being on Gary Nedrotic stream last night for Friday Night Tights and to have him on and actually talk to him in person, because I feel like I read his words so often on this channel because, as you all know, I try and avoid, if at all possible, any stories from all of the mainstream media outlets because of the inherent biases within those organizations, where Bounding Into Comics always makes it very clear what the stories are about, whether it's rumor, whether it's fact, whether it's report, and always really, I honestly think, does it as objective as possible and really is more straightforward with the reporting than anyone else. But this is some news that is actually kind of upsetting because the one thing I would say that there were two shows or two things I was looking forward to in Star Wars, even just a little bit, and those would be the Mandalorian series and obviously Clone Wars Season 7. But now we've gotten some word from one of the actors who I actually really like as an actor. If no one's ever seen the show Breaking Bad, Giancarlo Esposito is one of the best parts of that show. He plays such a great villain. His death is one of the coolest in television history with what they were able to do with the effects. I mean, seriously, it's wonderful. And so I was really looking forward to his role in this movie, or rather in this TV series, because I thought that he would do a really good job. But based on his wording here, and obviously I think that we could easily look at this and say that it could just be very subtle and not that important, but it could also be a sign, right? It could be a sign of things to come, and I really hope that it's not. And that is, of course, that The Mandalorian will apparently have political messaging, which is something that all of us are just so sick and tired of, right? We are just sick and tired of all of these things being thrust into every single aspect of our life. It was just reported the other day that, for example, It Chapter 2 changed the sexuality of one of their characters just out of the blue. Not something that was in the book, something they decided to do on their own, and the justification was, oh, we wanted to make the character more interesting. Okay, well then why don't you just use the source material that you're basing your book, basing your movie off of, and dive into that instead of you just coming up with things out of thin air. Again, I'm just so sick and tired of it. People are getting way too overexposed here, and honestly, it's just the same thing over and over and over again. This one, though, of course, seems to be a little bit more political, especially when it comes to U.S. politics. So, in a group interview alongside his castmates with Entertainment Weekly, Esposito was describing his character and the role he would play before hinting his character and his role in the show reflects a struggle with a moral boundary. So Esposito says this: "It's possible he's an antagonist. He was someone who was very high up in the Empire years ago, very high up officer. He's kind of an Imperial remnant of that time after the Empire fell," which, to be honest, that sounds pretty cool. We have all of these marshals who are different, who are given different areas to be top cop in. But I know my character, Moff Gideon, has other ideas. He could be a savior in a world that is lawless with leaders who exhibit a kind of faulty power because they have ideas that they want to aggrandize themselves. That seems to be a subtle shot, though, of course, hopefully it is just a subtle shot at people in power in general and not at one in particular. Not to say that it might not be based in reality. However, we are sick and tired of this stuff being put into our shows, right? If you're going to put it in, put everything in. The problem is that there's obviously only one side when it comes to most people in Hollywood, and that is the side that always gets pushed, and we are just sick and tired of it. We are in that world right now. That's why the show is so very particular at this time in our history. Yes, it's entertainment, but yes, it's also enlightening in the way that we are all struggling with the moral boundary. Do we accept or do we not accept? Which moral boundary is being discussed here? I wonder. Who is he talking about? What country is he talking about right here? What is this moral boundary that he speaks of? Again, it's not very hard for us to really dive too deep into this to understand that it's clearly trying to point out various things about our own modern, political culture. And as I said, we can have that discussion, right? We can have that discussion in the public forum. And we can easily say that there are shows and movies, even the original Star Wars movies themselves, that had elements of that, right? That had elements that definitely seem to tie into certain elements going on in the everyday real life world. The difference, though, is that if you look back at those movies, you don't see it clear, oh, this is obviously attack on this person, or this is obviously pushing this agenda, or this is obviously pushing this type of political mindset, right? Instead, it was just simply, oh, I could see how one could take it in this way, but for the most part, it's just entertainment. So what I'm hoping is that the show is this way, and that this is just the actor's perception of the role and of the character. And as I said before, because you have people like Dave Filoni, because you have people like Jon Favreau, I have imagining that it likely is more to be just a really good show with good writing that has these subtle aspects to them than full-blown politics, right? And I think that most of us can say, I can get past the small little jab here and there as long as it's more kind of like read between the lines rather than just being straight into your face. But one could easily look at this and say that it seems to be a little bit more than just subtle. It seems to be a lot more punching in your face that this is something that is reflecting the modern day culture. And we can obviously say that TV shows and movies reflect aspects of the modern culture. But the difference is that that culture tends to be one-sided. You never see multiple sides of the culture. The culture is a very vast thing. There are many different peoples that exist in this culture. The unfortunate thing is that people run to saying, oh, well, it's a part of the culture. And movies and TV shows have always done that, without realizing and without admitting the fact that they're only showing one side and one aspect, or unfortunately, one political thought, right? They're only showing one political side. We live in a world where most people are either in the middle, and there's at least equal peoples on both sides of the extremes. And we're not getting equal representation of the middle or of the right, unfortunately, right? If we're going to have to go politics, if we're going to have the culture be represented in every single thing we do, then do it equally. But we're not going to get that, and so that's why me and many others have just said, okay, so just keep it out of it altogether. Since you obviously don't know how to handle this, since you obviously don't know how to balance this, then just keep it out altogether. Just make a good show. Just write good characters. Just focus on telling a great story within the Star Wars universe, because that's what fans want. Fans are tired. Look at Solo, a Star Wars story. You want to know one of the many reasons why that film failed? Not just because of the preachings of Kathleen Kennedy, not just because of the idiocy of Rian Johnson, but also because the writer of that movie, or one of the writers of that film, came out and said, oh yeah, by the way, Lando Calrissian is a pansexual, because he will have relationships with anything in the galaxy, including a robot. And so people saw that and heard that and said, wait a minute, what? When has sexuality have ever had anything to do with the Star Wars universe? When has it ever been at the center point of any interview ever given, right? And I know some people could say, oh, what about Slave Leia and all these other things? And of course, we can point back to those things, but it's obviously much different, right? And it's like, oh, you're just saying that because it's what you agree with. And it's like, no, I'm just saying that was actually within the context of the movie, and it was within the context of what one of those characters was doing, Jabba the Hutt, and so therefore it actually made total sense with what was going on there. If it had just existed in isolation and came out of nowhere, then we would be saying the same exact thing. But because it didn't, that is where we are. He says, all this plays into what we were trying to express in this very, very complicated piece that people seem to think is from the 70s, but now it is reinvented and it's here, and it's honest now, and it should be very informative and exciting at the same time. And I think that, John F. Trent does a really good job here saying, now it's possible the show could be subtle about its political implications in the real world, and instead of focus on the politics happening within Star Wars universe. This was done effectively in the Clone Wars animated series and in prequel trilogy. And I would say that that's definitely something that's accurate, right? It was able to bring in politics within the show, right? Obviously, Clone Wars did that very well. That's one of the biggest criticisms of the prequels, was that it had too much of that politics behind the scenes. Some people loved it, some people hated it, but hey, it did stick within the actual show itself. It was not trying to say, oh, guess who we're talking about, or oh, guess what this means, right? They weren't throwing in lines that were connecting to things going on in the actually everyday world. It was being a lot more subtle than just that. Producer Dave Filoni says, I've seen a lot of Star Wars, and what's most exciting to me is that I'm very confident we did some things and fans will see things that have never been seen before, and I hope so, because that's what fans want. We want to see new things. We want to see things that have never been done before, and we don't want to watch a series that's going to constantly try to remind us about the world we live in. You can say all you want and defend all you want that the movies and TV shows of our time are meant to reflect our culture, but if you are trying to shape culture, if you are trying to push culture onto people, that is a very different story, and that's unfortunately what most of these people in Hollywood today are trying to do. They're not trying to reflect it. If they were, it'd be a lot more balanced. If they did, it would be a lot more subtle. Instead, they are trying to push agendas because they know that they have the power, they have the platform to shape the minds, especially of the youth in our own country and in our world. And I don't want any major corporation or any major company or studio trying to form the minds of anyone, because if we know anything about them, they are filled with self-centered asshat people. But anyway, let me know your thoughts about this. Are you concerned now about The Mandalorian? The fact that one of their stars, who again is a really talented actor, I'm not taking anything away from his acting chops, and I still think that there's a good chance that the show could be good, but this does now kind of bring in a new element, right? This is no longer just me saying, oh man, it's going to bring in and really tie into the Kathleen Kennedy era Star Wars movies, or oh, it's going to pay tribute to them. Obviously, that's something to be concerned about from a storytelling perspective, because those new elements that have been brought in recently really aren't all that good. But this brings something else to it, because now it's about modern day politics somehow or another being brought into the discussion. And I think most of us can agree, hopefully, that that should just be left out of the discussion completely. And if you're going to do it, make it subtle, make it basically ambiguous, where you could take it one way or the other, because that's the way that it should be done if it's going to be done at all. And if you can't do that, just please shut the hell up already. Anyway, let me know your thoughts about all these things in the comments below. Like this video, smash that like button, give me a subscribe, it helps me out a lot. Check out my affiliate links in the description below if you want to support the channel, and also get access to some really cool stuff, including my merch. I've been asked to promote my merch a little bit more, because there's a lot of people who have the shirts and want more people to have those shirts. Go ahead and click on the banner. You'll see it on the page for this video, but also you'll find the Teespring link in the description below. They're pretty good, and also they are pretty much the cheapest shirts you're gonna find from any person that does anything on YouTube. I don't really make a huge profit off of the shirts because it's not about that for me. It's all about trying to, again, offer as much content as I possibly can. That's why I'd like to do a lot of giveaways. That's why I like to try and, basically have these shirts sold at cost from Teespring and make very little profit from them. My wife designed it, and I'm very proud of the design, so please check those out for yourself also. Anyway, thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day, and as always, God bless.